Well, today, the Senate will vote on 4 controversial gun control bills. They would prohibit firearm sales to individuals on terror watch lists and expand background checks. And this comes after Democrats, led by Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy, held a nearly 15-hour filibuster on the Senate floor in protest of the lack of gun control legislation post-Orlando. But most Republicans oppose the measures, saying they violate the Second Amendment. Joining us now from Washington is CBS News congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes, who's on the Hill. Nancy, what are the possible outcomes of today's vote?
Well, there are really only 2 possible outcomes, Vlad. Either the measures succeed or fail, and in this case, all signs point to the measures failing. You've got 2 Democratic amendments, 2 Republican amendments. That was the deal. The Democrats don't like the Republican plans, the Republicans don't like the Democratic plans, and all of these bills have come up for votes in the past, most recently after the San Bernardino shootings, and they failed then, and there's no indication that there's been some kind of seismic shift here in the Senate that would result in a different outcome this time.
Nancy, for our viewers who have seen this happen time and time again, why does this issue so often break down among party lines?
Well, because there are a lot of Republicans who, here on Capitol Hill, who might be open to a few more restrictions, say closing some loopholes when it comes to background checks, but who also worry that if you open the door to more regulation, to new restrictions, they wonder where does it end. They argue that if Democrats get their foot in the door and they are able, for example, to close the gun show loophole, then they'll come along and say, well, now we want to do this and now we want to do that, and this also makes sense. And so there are Second Amendment enthusiasts here on Capitol Hill who say that it is a slippery slope. On the other hand, there are Democrats on Capitol Hill who are from red states, who don't side with their blue state colleagues and who also vote against gun legislation. And so here in the Senate, where you need 60 votes to get onto major pieces of legislation, it's just very, very difficult to get over that hurdle. And because guns are an issue, Vlad, where it is so difficult to find a middle ground, some kind of compromise, you do see from time to time, and we're seeing it again right now, members from different sides trying to work together to find a compromise, but it's often very elusive.
Yeah, and in fact, Nancy, we know Senator Susan Collins, who is leading bipartisan talks on gun safety legislation, is set to hold a news conference later today. What have you heard about what she might address?
Well, she's trying to work with her Republican colleagues to come up with some kind of middle ground between what Democrats want, which is to say that anybody who's on any kind of terrorist watch list or being investigated as a potential terrorist can automatically be denied a gun, no questions asked. That's what Democrats want. Republicans say that's too broad. Somebody could get caught up on that list by accident, and then you're denying them their rights if they can't get a gun and they have no recourse. So Republicans have a plan that says that if somebody on one of those lists tries to buy a gun, that there's essentially a 72-hour freeze, and then prosecutors would have to go to a judge and try to convince that judge not to give this person a gun. Democrats say that's too onerous and that it's not going to stop somebody who really wants to get a gun. So what Susan Collins is doing is she's working with predominantly her Republican colleagues to try to craft language that might reduce the pool of people that are being looked at from anybody who's on any terrorist watch list anywhere to just people specifically who are on the government's no-fly list. The problem is that Republican leaders haven't signed off on her language. We're now just a few hours away from the vote. So even if she is able to strike some kind of a compromise, it's not something that's going to be voted on tonight.
We'll see what happens today. Nancy Cordes in Washington. Thank you so much, Nancy.